I Hunt Reverse Vampires, Part 1. Yeah, you read the title right. I hunt vampires, but not quite the ones you're thinking of. Yes, they are undead. They feast on the blood of humans and use sex appeal to lure in hapless victims. But that's where it all stops, for the most part. The best way to describe them is reverse vampires. All the lore you know was created as misinformation by the high-ranking clans. They taught us to expect the exact opposite from what they truly are. But they are still vain bastards, so they leave hints to their true nature if you know how to spot it. I could read all of their qualities and behaviors out to you like a textbook, but I want you to actually listen and not fall asleep. So I'll tell you a little story. How I first came across their accursed kind, how my life was changed forever. I grew up in a small town in Idaho, like very small, less than 1,000 people. Most of the people who lived there were farmers. My father was a corn farmer, and me and my twin brother were his ranch hands. We were only 16 at the time, and we're homeschooled and naive. At least my pops gave us the weekend off from farming and studying. Being in a tight-knit community meant everybody knew everybody. Me and my bro would walk about a mile to the corner store to get snacks most weekends. There wasn't much else to do, but the store was a local meetup for kids in my youth group. We didn't have many options in ways of girls. Our youth group had only 2 of them. My brother was dating one, and the other one wasn't very pretty. But like most 16-year-old boys, we were obsessed with pretty girls, but also terrified of them. So you can imagine my amazement when a dark-skinned beauty stepped out of the cornfield as we walked down the road towards the corner store one Saturday. Oh my God, was she beautiful. This was my first time seeing a 10 in the wild. Long black hair shining in the noonday sun, soft, elegant features, and big, brown, almond eyes. Her skin tone was a rich brown hue that seemed to glow with an inner light. She wore a thin, light-colored summer dress showing off her prominent curves. I only saw her for a second, but I already had a clear mental picture in my head. She stood about 15 yards from me at the edge of the cornfield. She smiled a beautiful smile and turned to disappear into the corn. I stopped, dumbstruck. My brother had been walking beside me and looked down at his phone while complaining about his girlfriend. When he noticed I stopped, he turned to look at me. "Did you see her?" I spoke with amazement. Of course he had not. When I described her, he laughed. "You really need a girlfriend, bro. You're so pent up, your mind is making one up for you now." I must have looked like an idiot, running back and forth down the edge line of the cornfield, trying to catch a glimpse of her. I only stopped because my brother started to film me with his phone, narrating the whole thing for his girlfriend. I grabbed my brother and we began wrestling. A pretty normal thing between us. The only reason our fight was cut short was because a beat-up blue Ford pickup had come rolling up. I almost had my bro pinned when I noticed it. It had to stop by us and just sat idling loudly. We both got up and started dusting off the dirt and grass clinging to us. The tint on the windows was almost pitch black, so I couldn't see inside. "We're okay. We were just playing around," I said. "Yeah," my brother agreed. No response from the vehicle. It just lingered a moment before driving off. After this event, I decided I had to keep my mouth shut. Too much weirdness for one day. Maybe I imagined the girl. What could a girl like that even be doing in the middle of nowhere anyways? So, the next day came. I bugged my brother to make the walk to the corner store again. It was after church, around 1 p.m. Maybe the beauty would show herself again. Soon, my boyhood dream would turn into a nightmare. We were walking around the same place when she stepped out of the stocks. She was more beautiful than I remembered. This time, my brother saw her too. His mouth was agape when he turned to look at me. We stood admiring her for a while. She gave a playful smile and began to walk back to us. My heart jumped in my chest. Hi," my brother said. Damn it, I wanted to be the one to talk first. "Hello, boys," she said back warmly. She had a hint of an unfamiliar accent. Maybe she was Indian or Arabic. I saw you yesterday," I butted in. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, I like a man that's to the point," she laughed. A beautiful laugh. She looked me in the eye and smiled. "I've been looking for someone to help me with my tractor." She pointed to the cornfield. "Do you live here?" my brother asked. "I thought the Springers owned this field." "We bought part of it," she said quickly. "But my tractor is stuck and I need help moving it."
Do you know anything about tractors?
I mean, a little, I said. Truth is, I would have admitted anything to be closer to her.
Oh, good,
she said as she stepped forward to take my hands into her own. I felt the heat begin to rise in my cheeks.
Will you come?
I nodded my head vigorously, but my bro looked a little trepidatious. Maybe he was a smarter one. She turned to him and said,
You can meet my sister. She is my twin, like you two.
And that was all my brother needed. I could tell he was already working on how he was going to break up with his current girlfriend. Still holding my hand, she led us into the cornfield. She picked up the pace and almost pulled me forward. We walked further and further into the field. My brother began to wonder aloud where we were going.
Almost there, she said. I can feel them getting closer.
That comment should have raised some flags, but I was thinking with the wrong head. We finally broke through the large, circular clearing. The stalks had all been flattened down, reminiscent of a crop circle. There was no tractor I could see, but there were 3 people standing in the center of the clearing. They all wore white clothes, hands spread and looking up into the sky. All 3 were dark-skinned and beautiful, like the girl. The girl holding my hand turned and smiled at me again.
Come, meet my family,
she said as she pulled me closer to them. There in fact was a girl looking like she could be a twin sister, and another girl, dark tan and bleach blonde hair. In the middle stood a tall, dark, statuesque man with a close-cut beard, voluminous, flowing hair, and prominent muscles. His shirt was open to show his chiseled chest. She took me right up to him. I wasn't intimidated by the tall, handsome man. He had an aura of power about him. If he was this girl's boyfriend, I could never compete. He stood quietly, with his eyes closed, letting the sun warm his face and body. I looked back and forth at all 3 of them with their hands outstretched, facing the sun. What are they doing? I asked.
They are basking, the girl responded, communing with the sun god.
Her smile had turned from friendly to something else. Teasing, maybe? Are you all some sort of hippie cult? Came my brother's voice behind me. A dark look shot across her perfect face, before returning to the reassuring grin.
Come here and meet my sister,
she said, and beckoned my brother closer. She turned and spoke quietly to the tall man.
Ahmad, I've brought tributes.
His eyes fluttered, and he opened them to slowly look down at us. His eyes were a brilliant green, and he held a quiet intensity. His stare made my heart race quicker than the girl's did. I felt the need to make this man like me.
You did good, Yoti, he said to the girl.
She smiled and looked away in embarrassment.
Sisters, awaken for the gifts Yoti has brought us, he announced.
The 2 females opened their eyes and looked at us. The blonde let out a laugh of surprise, and the twin began to flow towards my brother. My brother's face reddened as the alluring woman walked around inspecting him. So, do you need help with the tractor? My brother said, looking back at the men.
Both of you will be quiet now,
Almond said. I completely agreed with him. I wouldn't talk unless he said I could. My brother quieted also. We both waited for him to tell us what to do. He looked at the girl, Yoti, and asked,
Which one do you want to keep?
She bit her lip and pointed at me. I had never felt so grateful in my life. I would do anything for her, and him. My only regret was my brother had not been chosen to be part of whatever else they had planned. The man sighed, and motioned for my brother to step forward. Come, he commanded gently. Come, he commanded gently. My brother walked up to stand beside me. The 3 women surrounded him. I heard a soft moan come from one of them. The man turned on me and leaned in, his green eyes blazing. He said with a clear smirk,
Whatever happens, you won't move.
I froze in place, and I stilled myself with all my heart. I knew I would never disobey him.
But you,
he turned to my brother.
You may fight if you want.
What? My brother said. His last word. The tall man shot out with his hand and cut my brother's cheek. 3 lines of crimson began to form on his face. All my brother had time to do was reach up to his cheek and give me a look of horror. In an instant, the 2 twins bit onto either side of his neck. The blonde attacked him from the front, lashing out to bite his nose. He screamed as they dragged him to the ground. I saw all this from the corner of my vision. I screamed with my brother, but I didn't move. I could hear ripping and moaning as my brother's screams turned into helpless gurgling. I was breathing rapidly, tearing up. My twin brother was dead. But I
couldn't turn my head to look. Ahmund smiled cruelly and said, "You may look, child." And I did. My brother was laid on his back, eyes open, frozen, in a death mask of horror. His nose was missing, and giant chunks had been taken out from his neck. He was covered with his own blood. 3 women were fervently sucking and licking the blood off him like hungry leeches. I began screaming at this point. I was terrified, heartbroken, and angry. Angry at these bloodsuckers and at myself for not doing anything. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. And I wanted to fight. The beautiful woman looked up at me, my brother's blood smeared across her face. At this moment, I hated her. Her beauty no longer wooed me. I could see the monster she was. "You bitch!" I growled at her.
"None of that,"
Amon said.
"Look over here, boy."
My head shot back to look into his green eyes. A look crossed his face. At first, I thought it was pity. Then I realized he was cringing at the sight of me.
"I don't know what Yoti sees in you, but she's the reason you're not dead like your idiot brother."
Amon scooted closer and put his arm around my shoulder. His breath smelled like a rancid roadkill.
"Thing is, we need to grow our nest back to full strength. The cattle killed 4 of my followers back in El Paso. You'll get to be the new guy at the bottom of the totem pole. I'm sure the girls will have a lot of fun with you."
He ended his sentence with a hard slap to my butt.
"Maybe I'll join in too."
That's when something began to change in me. All sadness left me and was replaced with a white, hot rage. Amon stepped back, and Yoti swooned in front of me. She was speaking sweetly to me and telling me about how I would be changed into something new. I didn't care. I was seeing red. I felt myself beginning to move. I launched forward past Yoti and swung wide with my right arm. I saw a flash of surprise in his green eyes as my fist made a hard contact. His head rocked so hard, I saw a mist of sweat and spittle leave his face. When he looked back, his face was a mix of incredulousness and anger. His hand shot out and grabbed me by the throat. I let out a stifled choke as he lifted me into the air.
"You insolent vermin! You dare strike me, you pan-shot worm!"
Yoti was terrified and tried to comfort Ahmad. He kicked her hard in the stomach. She skidded across the ground to the edge of the clearing.
"We were going to save you, give you the gift of eternal life, but now I redirect my offer for mercy."
He squeezed me tighter.
"Now I pull you apart piece by piece."
It all happened at once. Kahmun's body shook violently, and an incredible boom ripped through the air. My ears rang, and birds took flight all around the clearing. I felt heat as Ahmund's chest erupted into flames. He screamed and looked to the side. Another blast, and I fell to the ground, fire all around me. That's when I realized that Ahmund's severed head was still around my throat and on fire. I pulled hard at it to finally fling it away from me, my hand being burned in the process. I sat up to see Ahmund struggling to stand. Fire engulfed his chest, and he was missing a right arm. He screamed with a good amount of fear.
Shield me! Shield me!"
Yoti and her twin ran to stand in front of Ahmund. Yoti spread her arms out and screamed out into the field. The other twin hugged Ahmund tightly and began batting his flames away vigorously. Another boom resounded, and Yoti's face exploded into fiery bits. Ahmund turned and took off running into the opposite direction, with the twin tailing close behind. A new woman burst into the clearing beside me, racking a shotgun and sending a spent shell flying. She wore what looked like a welder's mask and an old-school army jacket. The blonde-haired monster was still crouched down by my brother's dead body. She hissed and reared up to face the camo woman. She looked like she was going to pounce when a metal arrow zipped into her head from the side. The blonde staggered. I could see an arrow went all the way through her temples. The blonde collapsed to the ground with a thud. I could see there was a thin wire attached to the end of the arrow, leading taut into the field. The line slackened, and another camouflaged girl came out reeling in the wire. A crossbow was hanging from a strap around her chest. "Finish the blonde, then help the kid," the first camo woman ordered before sprinting off in the direction of Ahmund. The crossbow girl had a balaclava and big aviator shades on. She walked quietly over to the downed blonde and looped the razor wire around her neck a couple times. She put her foot on the blonde's head and pushed down while pulling up with the razor wire in both hands. The way she had it gripped, she could pull back and forth with both hands, using the razor line to cut through the blonde's neck and bones. The blonde began to jerk and growl, even though there was an arrow stuck through her head. In less than 30 seconds, the head snapped off to roll across the clearing. Crossbow Girl had stumbled back and let out an accomplished sigh. I almost felt sorry for the blonde. Crossbow Girl walked over to me and removed her balaclava and aviators. She was a young girl with brown eyes, hundreds of freckles, but her face was stone cold. "Sup," she said as she offered me a hand. The girl escorted me back out of the cornfield. She kept talking on a walkie with the other woman who pursued Almond. When we got back to the road, the beat-up Ford was there from the other day. The beat-up Ford from the other day was sitting there. I was sitting in the back of the seat. I was seated in the back seat as the girl gave me a water and began digging around in the bed of the truck. The inside of the truck was filled with fast food wrappers, stray bullets, and maps. Mom lost his trail and is doubling back, the girl said suddenly, reappearing beside me. She will collect your brother's remains when she gets back. Sorry about that, by the way. I turned to stare blankly at her. So they were mother and daughter. They went around, shooting killer hippies with flaming shotgun shells and crossbows. You're in shock. I crushed a Klano pen in your water, so drink it up. I blinked. Who are you? What were they? Just what is... I trailed off. She put her hand on my shoulder. I winced as I remembered Amon doing the same thing. She got close, and her breath smelled like spearmint instead of rot. We are hunters. Those were vampires. Ma will tell you more when she gets back. Drink your water. The rest of the day was a blur. Hot sun beat down on my cold sweat, but Ma did come back, and she was much more abrasive than her daughter. She told me pretty much what I told you at the beginning. These are vampires. Not the night-dwelling emo kind, but the sun-baked hippie kind. They basked in the sun to charge their bodies and stay alive. But all that sun dehydrates, so they need blood. She told me their totem isn't a bat. It's Ra, the sun god. Legend says the first vampires were his children. They have preyed upon us for millennia, literally doing it in broad daylight. Ma took me to bag up my brother's body, and she had a body bag in her trunk. I cried the whole time, and she didn't judge me. I'm glad she left her daughter in the truck. Celia was the daughter's name, I was told. She said my brother wasn't turned, so he could get a proper burial back at my farm. She did tell me that they would have to make me a cover story about what happened here. When I asked why, she said many vampire clans worked to keep the secret from the world. If the story got out, a rival clan might kill me and my family to keep the story from spreading. I asked how many clans existed. She said she was uncertain because they were so secretive. She told me Amund was actually royalty in a vampire clan. He had gone rogue and started killing recklessly. That's how she got onto his trail. It was getting dark, and we were back sitting on the trail of the ford when I asked, "Do they hunt at night?" "No, very rarely," said Ma in a gruff voice. "They lose their charm ability and freak strength. Also, they sort of glow from the sun they absorb." "Twilight got something right," Celia said. I snorted a laugh, and the grief left me for an instant before flooding back in. I turned to look at the body bag loaded behind me. I need to get home. I need to tell Dad. I started crying again. "Listen, kid," Ma said sharply. I turned blurry-eyed to face her. "We have ways to make you forget this day. We can make your pop forget this day, too. We have the technology. I can make it seem like an animal got your brother. Or a car hit him. I can convince the cops, too. It would be easy in this area. You probably have only one, anyways." She jumped down from the tailgate to stand and face me clearly. "But I can feel your anger. You broke free from the charm of a royal vampire. You punched the asshole in the head. I think you want to remember. I think you want to be angry." I wiped the tears and snot away. I was intrigued by Ma's proposition. I wouldn't ever have to remember the sight and the sound of my twin being killed beside me. I could forget how I felt, so helpless. I could forget about Almond. Almond. My fists and my jaw clenched at the memory of his green-eyed stare. "No," I said flatly. "My dad, yes, but not me. I have to remember. He was my twin brother." She stared back at me, thinking. Her wrinkles seemed deeper in the failing light. Then she finally spoke. Then there's one thing I need to tell you. A lot of things will be kept from you at first, but I have to start with honesty. I gulped. I knew she was about to say something hard to hear. We use you two as bait, she sighed. The other day, I put a striking spell on both of you. I knew the freaks would go after such helpless victims. She looked to the ground and I could see genuine sorrow in her face. But we did try to get both of y'all fast. We did try to save you both. I went over it in my head. Ma could have warned us, but would we have listened? I sat still for a good moment before responding. It happened. You did try to save us. It was not you who murdered my brother. It's Amon. I spat the words. It's he who should pay. He and his whores. Ma cracked a smile at this. What were your plans when you graduate? My brother and I were going to join the Marine Corps together. Buddy program, like my dad did when he was our age. A twinge of sadness stabbed my heart again at the thought of him. Ma pulled a card out of her back pocket and handed it to me. It was wrinkled and old, with a 1-800 phone number on it. In 2 years, when you graduate, and you want to forget all of this and move on with your life, you call this number, and someone will come to take those memories from you. She snatched it back and quickly wrote a number on the back side of the card. If you graduate, and you still feel angry, and you want to do something about that anger, you call me. So that's my first story of how I got on the path of being a hunter. I was dropped off at the house, and Ma took Dad inside to talk. When I came in later, he was crying about his boy being hit by a car. When the sheriff arrived, he was soon saying the same thing. Some sort of magic Ma used. Yeah, magic. It gets crazy. I guess you deduced which phone number I called the day I graduated. Also, we don't call them vampires. They go by a bunch of different names. The popular one is the anagram, Mavrip. I think it's stupid, so we just call them Mavs. Easier than reverse vampire. So, maybe I should have started the story with that. But you would